right, well, we'll go ahead and get started just to be respectful of everyone's time this afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Stop Spinning Your Wheels and Focus on Content That Matters with Pixo. Before I hand it over to Danielle and she introduces Lindsey, I just have a few quick comments. You are welcome to ask questions. Just submit those via the chat box and we'll make sure that they're addressed before the end of the session today. And then we'll also send a follow-up email and that will go out tomorrow morning containing a recording to today's link. So if there's any information you missed or just want to revisit, you'll be able to go back and do that as well. We also are working on making sure that we are able to provide various webinars throughout the year. So we will work with Pixo again throughout the rest of 2023 to provide additional sessions. So please be on the lookout for those wherever you found this session. You'll be able to find any future ones as well. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Danielle and we'll get started.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It is a pleasure to be here as always, and we do look forward to future sessions and always looking for what would be helpful for you all that are attending these so we can plan for those accordingly. My name's Danielle Hendricks. I am the head of sales for Pixo. And if you haven't heard of us already, we are a software consultancy in Urbana, and we create websites, software, and apps that put people first and address unique challenges. I'm going to hand this over to Lindsey to talk about the topic today with content and introduce herself. This is just a really, it's an exciting webinar that she has done before. And I really love listening to it every time because there's always something new that she says that I catch. But content is a huge part of, the start of a lot of website projects. So even if you have your website already started, this can be really helpful. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsey.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I love this topic. This is my favorite webinar to do. Don't tell the other webinars. So thank you very much for having us today. Thank you for being here today. Let's get into it. Okay, my name is Lindsey Markel, as Danielle mentioned. My title at Pixo is Content Strategist. I'm a content strategist. Content strategy is sort of a subset of user experience or UX. So I get to brag because I was Pixo's first content strategist. I've been here for 8 years, which is bonkers, wild to me. But it's been a beautiful 8 years. I've learned a lot and we'll be sharing quite a bit of that with you today. Content strategy, if you're not familiar with the field, is basically about getting the right content. And when I say content, I'm just talking about the stuff on your site, information, text, media, video, getting that to the people who need it when they need it. It sounds simple, and it is relatively simple. We're going to talk about some things not to spend your time on today, basically. This webinar that I like so much was born out of being in consulting and doing this with people every day, helping people build their websites, rework their existing websites, and seeing them really get caught up and spending time and energy on things that we knew as experts, as strategists, as consultants, really don't matter that much. And truth be told, we spin our wheels from time to time as well. It happens to all of us. So this is an effort to sort of get us all back on track. So, okay, let me get who can use this? I mentioned this is sort of this was sort of born of wanting to have that movie moment with clients where you shake someone or do the big slap and you're get a hold of yourself. This is sort of that. Hopefully you can use this if you manage or create content on a website. If you, of any sort, if you feel pressured by common content myths, and we're going to go through these sort of myths or things that people believe about websites that we want to get them away from, we'll go through those. Hopefully some of them will ring a bell in your head. This could be pressure from other stakeholders. You might have a loud stakeholder in your ear being this is the most important thing on our website. Or you might have an inner voice that just has misconceptions about what's important on the web. Or you might just need permission to get back to basics. Maybe you've been doing this for a while, managing a site, working on a site, contributing to one. You may know everything that I'm going to talk about today, but it's still a good opportunity to sort of check in with yourself and say, okay, I'm doing pretty good. All right, I'm on the right track. One great thing about content strategy is a lot of it, it's wow, wild. I was zoom out. Okay, one thing about content strategy is that it can be implemented at any level, anytime, anywhere on your site and be useful. So incremental changes are still valuable changes. So take what's useful in this talk and leave the rest. So that's royal we as content strategists, we as consultants, but also we as like people who use the internet know a lot by this point about how people use the web. Usability studies are everywhere. So that means we know that people primarily scan web content. We don't read web content the same way we would read, say, a novel, where we like read every single line, scrutinize every word. There's what you see on the left here is an eye tracking study from Nielsen Norman Group. And basically this is just showing the blue dots show how people's eyes scanned a web page as they were looking at it. So let me make sure as I'm saying this, I want to make sure that we're zoomed in the way that we should be zoomed in here and that you can see everything. Okay. So people, you can see most of the blue dots are at the top of each paragraph. So people are sort of scanning those top sentences in a paragraph to see, what is this about? This is happening subconsciously, largely. Seeing, okay, what is this paragraph about? Am I in the right place? Am I going to find the right information here? People use all sorts of devices on the web. They have varying abilities, varying circumstances, various environments around them as they're looking at your website. And they come to your site with a purpose, which is to say they have a goal in mind, and they're not really thinking about your site as much as they're thinking about what they're trying to accomplish on your site. We also know a lot about how people manage websites from working with our clients and from being content authors ourselves, from creating content for the web. So if these quite common scenarios apply to you, please know that you're not alone. Number one, web content is usually no one's full-time job. This is usually something that's sort of stacked on top of someone's already full-time job. We know that there can often be too many cooks in the kitchen. This is so common. A lot of competing goals to negotiate. A lot of those loud stakeholders in your ear being like, this is the most important thing on your site. Put it on we want it on the homepage. No, we want this on the homepage. We know that writing is hard for everyone. That's I'm not being facetious there. Even those of us who identify as writers, who like writing, who practice writing, I mean, maybe no, most of all, it's hard. It takes time, more time than you may expect. Your content management system, or CMS, basically your website, might be old, might be restrictive, hard to update, in desperate need of an overhaul. And at the same time, a major redesign of your site can seem really big and scary and can really be expensive, can be time consuming. That might not be a situation that's possible for you. So if you don't relate to any of these scenarios, wow, good for you. Kudos, love that for you. If any of this sounds familiar, there is hope. Don't lose hope. Just like there's hope for my slide situation, which seems to be kind of dire. Okay. So what we're talking about today is some sort of long-held beliefs about the web that people seem to have, that we hear all the time from people we work with, that we're like, just let's reframe this belief a little bit. These are the things that just seem to keep sticking in people's minds and keep them spending effort, time, money on things that just don't matter that much. So we'll go through each of these and then we'll talk about each one of them and reframe them in a way that I like better. Okay, first one is, we've got to keep that homepage freshness. If it's important, it should live above the fold. Is this too many clicks? We need to post a lot of news. Of course, we have a lot of great news. Someone's going to write it. People need to read it. We need a lot of news. We should embed our social media feeds on our website. Our public website is also our intranet, for like our internal people. You know what's cool? Video is really cool. If we could just do a video, all of our problems would be solved. So if any of these sound familiar at all, stay tuned. Okay, let's dig in. Keeping the homepage fresh. This is probably the thing we hear most often that really wastes a lot of people's time, basically. So it's true that the benefit of the web, the internet, is that it's ever changing. Every time you refresh a website, a new website, your browser's seeing it anew. That's great. Updating content is a great thing. We love it. But when we hear this, we've got to keep the homepage fresh, it's almost never coming from site visitors, from audiences. It's coming from site managers. It's coming from people who log into the site every day to make updates, from internal folks who have the website set as like their browser default. They see the same hero image, the same homepage day in, day out. They're like, this needs to be fresher. It needs to be fresher. The good news is that our favorite content strategy mantra at Pixo, I've been saying this for 8 years, is that your content is not for you. It's not for you. It's not for your internal stakeholders. It is for the people you're trying to reach. It's for your target audiences. It's for the people that you hope come to your site. And I say this every single time, I'm a broken record on this. If you create a website, you spend the time, effort, money on creating a website, building the content, publishing it, making sure it all looks right, just so you can go and look at that website. I am genuinely happy for you. And that sounds like a wonderful existence. For most people, that's not the case. You're trying to reach someone with your website. So the content is not for you, it's for them. And your site analytics will give you some pretty clear data. I'm guessing that the majority of your site visitors aren't frequent flyers. These are not people who are coming to your site every day to look at it. Like I mentioned earlier, people come to your site with a purpose. So they come to your site, they find what they want, and they usually get out. And that's good. We like that. So maybe they're prospective, customers, depending on what your site is for, prospective customers, prospective students, if you're in a higher ed organization. So again, the pressure is off for you to try and make that homepage feel different all of the time with a new photo or a new message on the homepage more than a couple times a year, maybe, or maybe most importantly, when it makes sense for a new campaign, a new initiative, something that's changed that you want to update. And so also homepage freshness and desiring freshness on the homepage usually leads to this. This is also a thing we hear all the time. When a homepage feels tired to people, or when you have those stakeholders in your ear and someone's insisting that multiple initiatives get top billing on the homepage, the solution that people ask us for all the time is this: the rotating banner, also known as a carousel, also known as a slideshow. It's very fresh, got a lot of stuff in it. It can move on its own. Don't we love it? We do not love it. A slideshow is not a silver bullet. It will not solve all of your problems. In fact, quite the opposite. So oftentimes, I would say as often as people have asked us to build a slideshow on their homepage, almost always the next question is, and can you make it so that like every time they refresh the homepage, they get a new image or like it moves on its own? Because that's really fresh when people just see something different all the time. But studies have shown especially if they auto rotate or anytime that content changes on people without the site visitor themselves changing it, it's annoying to people. It's annoying at best. And this is especially true for people with motor skill limitations, low literacy, people who speak English as a second language. When something's changing on your screen, you're trying to read fast enough to keep up with it, or you're like, oh wait, what was that? I was interested in that thing. And if you can't click back, when you're not in control of what you're seeing on your screen, it can be really annoying. It can make people leave your site. It can make people miss information, all bad. Also, just number 2 is people skip these. So when you add multiple slides to something, anywhere on your website, especially on your homepage, even if it's the interactive kind that people can control and can click through, studies like this one, the graph at the bottom, this is a study of 4 nonprofit websites that show the click-through rate on each slide. And so you can see from these rapidly declining lines that the click-through rate absolutely tanks the more slides there are to under 1%. And I'm not a math person, but that seems bad. The first slide is the most clicked. And after that, it's like, cuckoo bananas, no one's clicking on these. So this is not the way to solve this. The way to reframe your thinking about the homepage, it's not freshness that's important. You've got to keep the homepage current and accurate to your organization, ensuring that your visitors get the information that's most important to them. That's all they're looking for. Move freshness way down on your priority list. Next belief to reframe. If it's important, it should live above the fold. The fold. We remember newspapers, right? I'm turning 40 in a couple months. I still buy newspapers sometimes. Maybe we all do not remember newspapers, but this is where it comes from. So the fold makes sense for the medium of newspapers. You put the biggest headline above the literal fold of the paper because as newspapers are stacked on a stand, that's the only thing people are going to see in the physical realm. They only see that headline. And we want people to see that headline and think, I'm going to buy this paper. I got to know what's in here. That's what that's where the fold came from. So when people are talking about the fold on a website, it's really common for them to assume that the fold is the cutoff on their browser, on their device that they're using at the time that they're looking at the website. But here's the thing, the fold is a myth. The fold doesn't really exist on the web, at least as like a common universal thing, because the web is not a newsstand. We are all on different devices. I mean, I can see 1, 2, 3 just from where I'm standing, and I honestly might be missing one. 3 different potential folds just from where I'm standing. I've got a monitor, I've got a laptop, I've got my phone, I've got an Apple Watch somewhere in here, I've got an iPad. I mean, not to brag, but there's devices like in our homes. Each one of those are going to have a different fold. So it depends on how big your screen is on whatever kind of device you're using, how fast your internet connection is, if you have your browser zoomed in, how fast the content loads on a page, which is out of the visitor's control. So there is no single universal fold. And really, when people are talking about the fold and what we need to put above the fold, where that comes from is a fear that their site visitors are going to have to scroll to find something. And they're like, we don't want that. People shouldn't have to scroll to see something. But have we met ourselves? Because we love scrolling. I don't sleep for scrolling sometimes. I have apps installed on my phone. I mean, not anecdotal, we as a society get stat. You know, if you have an iPhone, you probably get a stat every week from your phone that's like, here's how much time you spent scrolling on your phone this week. We love to scroll. Devices are made to scroll. This mouse is made to scroll. Scrolling is natural on the web. It's expected on the web. And the key is you just have to keep people interested. People will scroll. People will not stop scrolling if you're giving them the information that they're looking for. That's what, you remember the blue dots on the Nielsen Norman test that we looked at earlier, people's eyes looking at a website. People will keep doing that as long as they're scanning the page and their sort of subconscious brain is saying, I'm in the right place, I'm finding the information I'm looking for. They will keep scrolling, keep scanning, keep reading. If the content is relevant to them, and if it's well structured, which basically means white space headers so that they can tell what's on this page. So the overall message here is don't be afraid of scrolling. Don't be as afraid of scrolling as a lot of people are. Scrolling's not a bad thing. It's also really good to remember that many people won't even come to your site through the homepage. When we're thinking about our own websites, when we're designing sites, we often, I think everyone does this, you sort of fall prey to this thought that like everyone that comes to your website will go to the homepage first, and then they'll use your primary navigation to find the section. And your site should be set up for that. Like your navigation should be clear, your menu should be clear. And a lot of people won't even come to your site through the homepage. They're going to Google in. They're just searching for whatever they need to find, and they'll go straight to that page. So obsessing over whatever's above the so-called fold on your homepage will not even be relevant to a large portion of your users. So definitely don't spend too much time spinning your wheels on that. Check your analytics if you have Google Analytics set up to see what pages are entry points for your people, for your audiences, where they're coming from. Are they coming from search? Do they come from social media? Do they come from referrals from other sites? And really think about that's where information needs to be for folks. Just keep it clear and they will keep scrolling. Don't worry about the fold as much. I also want to say the screenshots in this talk are from Google Analytics, the old Google Analytics, which is currently being sunsetted. And GA4 is the new. All I have to say about GA4 is if you use Google Analytics and you haven't switched, you need to switch because this is going to go away. So don't let these screenshots fool you. We can't hold on to the past, okay? Nothing gold can stay, and GA4 is on its way. Didn't mean to make that rhyme, but here we are. So reframing this thought about the fold, if it's important, it should live where its target audience can easily find it. Know who your audiences are. Know, if you can, what they're looking at. That's where the information should go. Don't worry about the fold. A lot of content strategy is about making these like unsexy but practical suggestions. Forget about the fold. Put it where your target audience can find it. Next up, this is a really good one. Is this ... too many clicks? So there's this common belief that nothing should be more than 3 clicks away from anything on a website. You should not make your poor users click more than 3 times on your website. And what I'm here to tell you is that there is no magic number of clicks, imagine. It all depends on context. And that's because the motor skill to click, or however you use to navigate the web to move to the next thing, that's not where the exertion comes in. Okay, the drag that you feel when something is hard to find is from having to think too hard. Clicking is easier than thinking. Again, another thing that sounds facetious, but it's not. Clicking we do subconsciously, moving through the web we do subconsciously. It's not that you click 3 times and then you're like, my finger, I can't click one more time. I hate this website. It's because you're having to think too hard. So this example, this is what we would call a mega menu sounds facetious, not a mega menu. It has 10 primary items across the top. We're just looking at one, the technology one. There are 6 subsections to this one part. And then within these 6 subsections, there's a ton of links to pages in each of these sections. So this is an example of a menu that may be trying to reduce number of clicks, because it's like, look at all these links. You only have to click a few times to get like deep in the menu, but it's a really big cognitive load to look at this menu and be like, okay, like you have to I just did it physically, like, oh, okay, what's here and what am I looking for? This is a much larger cognitive load, and this will exhaust people pretty quickly. So giving fewer well-labeled links at a time in a case like this will probably result in technically more clicks, but it's a much easier mental exercise for people to find what they're looking for. I'm obsessed. I love this slide and the stat because it looks fake. It doesn't look real. Like 600% feels like a made up number. However, it is, I assure you, real. In a study by Jacob Nielsen, users' abilities to find products on an e-commerce site increased by 600% after the design was changed, so that products were technically 4 clicks away from the homepage instead of 3 clicks away. Just one example, but it's powerful, 600%. And the same rule applies not just to e-commerce sites, but informational sites as well, and probably your site. So the best practice is, it doesn't really matter how many times we have to click within reason, as long as each click is a relatively easy choice for our brains. People get caught up when they don't know what they're looking for and they feel lost. So you don't have to ask, is this too many clicks? You should be asking, is this creating more cognitive load than it should? And you can test with real people to find out. This next one, depending on your situation, might not ring as many bells, but if you've ever heard this, thought this, we see this all the time when people are setting up new websites in particular. This idea of, we need to post a lot of news. We have a lot of news to post. And this one can be kind of heartbreaking, because people always have good intentions when we start projects like this and when they have these kinds of ideas. It's like, things are happening in our organization. We want to tell everyone about the great things that are happening. People need to hear it. That's how they'll get a sense of what we're all about. And so when we hear that from the Pixo side, we often end up designing a news section that looks a lot like this. This is just a generic example. It uses, lorem ipsum placeholder text, but usually a section looks a lot like this. So you will have like a news listing page that has all your stories on it. You can click on each one individually. And then you might see a section like this added to the homepage. So again, the homepage, pretty visible. And this is a pretty big content lift to commit to. Because if you look at this, obviously there's multiple stories that you can see at once. And for each story, you have a headline, you have a description, you have the full article, of course, that you're linking to, a category, a photo, and the date that it was published. And because of that date in particular, news is by definition timely, and the work it takes to stay on top of a section like this, news stories are often where content goes to rot. So if you're a content strategist like I am, not to brag, when we see that old content, we make a note of it and we see this is a red flag. We can see what's going on. So this was a Slack message I sent to my colleague, whose name is also Lindsey, confusing, but sorry, it's just her name. When we were starting a project to redesign a site, we were clicking through, looking at the content, and I had said something to her like, oh my gosh, they have all these news stories published, how exciting. And then I clicked on the most recent one and it was from 2017. So that's a sign to us that that was a well-intentioned commitment to news and it just fell through, which happens all the time. So as a content strategist, I can see what's going on here. We can kind of read between the lines as to what has happened. To a site visitor, they see old content like this and they feel like they can't trust your website to be up to date, to be current. They're not sure if they can trust the information that you're giving them. We were doing a project once for a higher ed site for a college, and I was interviewing a student or prospective student, and they gave a quote that was like, if a college isn't managing their website very well, I assume that they don't manage their program very well. And I was like, let me write that down because that's gold. It's true. So do yourself a favor and don't commit to more than you can do. Ask yourself, this is like gold. If you think about doing news, if you post updates on your site, pay attention to this part. You can zone out for the rest if you want. This part is important. I love these questions. So ask yourself these questions. What does news mean to you? What kind of format does it take? And with what frequency? We're going to go through some examples as well. What specific business or organizational or audience goals does it accomplish? Ideally, it accomplishes both. And honestly, most importantly, who is going to do this work? The intentions can be great. You know what? The spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. Who's going to do it? So unless you are a news outlet, and if anyone from the New York Times is here, please speak up. Most sites are not primarily news sources. It's usually the case of we're a business, we're an organization, we're a college or a school. We want to share what's going on. So let yourself take the pressure off and let the goals and communication strategy be your guide for the functionality that you need for updates. So some examples are, we occasionally share links to other news resources to amplify our experts when they're quoted. People are talking about you, there are articles published about your organization, interviews, etc. That's great. You should share those links on social media. That sounds great. Share those links. You have those links. People can get those. We sometimes need to post brief updates like application deadlines for a school, COVID guidelines, I don't know, a sale that's going on perhaps, to keep audiences informed. That might be a feature on your website, an alert bar or an announcement on the website, instead of the much heavier lift of a news article and creating a whole news section on your site just for those. Our communications team writes in-depth articles every week about faculty research, student life, alumni to appeal to prospective students. So this is specifically, obviously, a higher ed example, but what we have here in this example are who's going to do the work, what are they going to write, what will that be about, how often will they do it, and who is it for? That's news, baby. You got yourself a news section. You have earned a news section. Go forth and prosper. That's beautiful. That's news. And yet this is what we kind of hear most often is this last one. Yeah, so-and-so really wants to start a blog, like they really want to talk about us, but we're not really sure what it's going to be about, or they also don't really have the time to do it, but they'll fit it in. And we're not really sure how it fits into our larger communication strategy, but we're just going to throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And that's a no. That's just a big red flag. Like, do not pursue this. This person can start a Substack. They can start, make Facebook updates about what they want to talk about. Do not start a news section on a site or a blog on your site about this. So if you're doing any or all of these things, minus the last one, don't do that. A news section could be the solution. This is not like hard and fast rules, but our experience tells us that you should really consider the strategy, how do you communicate with people, and the resources, who is going to do this and when, before you commit. So instead of, we need to post a lot of news, we have so much news to post, just think, we need a way to communicate the timely content that we have. That could be just straight web content, text on a basic page. That still makes my heart flutter as a content strategist. It's straightforward, it's basic, it's great. That's a great solution. But if you start a news section that doesn't have content posted within, I would say at least the last month or 2 months, starts to seem stale, people start to distrust your site. So just start with what you have and build from there. Okay, this next one, this is kind of fun. We should embed our social media feeds on our website. Should you? It's honestly a good question. There are pros and cons. So people do this. As you can see here, there are some examples. We see Twitter feeds, we see Instagram feeds. We've certainly built, homepages, websites that have them built in. It's not that it's a automatic yes or automatic no. It's just that oftentimes people are like, we definitely should, without thinking through the pros and cons. So some pros are, if you're frequently posting on social media, you have a robust social media presence, then pulling that in gives your site updated content, which, depending on what that content is, could make your job easier as an updater of the site. It can make search engines happy. Social media might be where your brand, your organization voice, or your personality really comes through. It can encourage site visitors to follow you on those platforms. So if that's something you desire, that can really amp that up. That can be great. But there are also some cons that people don't think about or aren't aware of. To embed social media feeds on your site, that often takes some extra scripts written into the code, and those extra scripts can slow down your site considerably. And this is not a talk about site performance, but we do talk a lot about site performance. Come to another webinar to hear about that. But I really couldn't say enough about how much people are usually frequently unaware of how important a fast loading site is for the user experience. So embedding social media feeds can really slow that down, and even, half a second can have a big impact on whether or not people stick around on your site. Social media can often be a lot more casually written than content on your site. It's more ephemeral by nature, and it may not really be the voice that's appropriate for your site or the voice that you want to project on your website. Oftentimes, the people who are running social media for an organization are like interns or grad students for schools. They come and go. The voice can change drastically depending on who's doing it. It's a little more informal generally. So do you want that to be represented on your website? And you're also, by nature, encouraging site visitors to leave your site and go to your social media sites by posting it there, which is not necessarily good or bad. It just depends. But this idea of we should embed our social media usually comes up for a couple red flaggy looking reasons in our experience. Is your social media content just better than your web content? Are you investing more resources there? Are your social media platforms just easier to update than your old clunky CMS? I feel for you, and yet that's not really a good reason to embed on your site, because one shouldn't be a stand-in for the other. You should have a strategy, and by strategy, I really just mean an idea, a plan for what belongs on the website, what belongs on social media. So if those are the reasons why you want to embed social media on your website, then it's time to step back and define the strategy. Again, just a plan. It could be simple for all your communications, to have a clear picture of what content goes where and why. Who is it for? What do we post where? How often do we do it? Those are the simple things that you really should have in mind. It will save you so much time and pain in the long run. So instead of, we got to embed our social media feeds on our website, we should listen to Lindsey and take a step back and define our strategy for all communications. It's not as exciting, but it works, I promise. Our public website is also our intranet. This comes up for big companies, big organizations, schools. A lot of schools say this. So basically what this means is you're using one website to serve both your external audiences, which is what we've been talking about, your customers, your students, and your internal audiences. So for instance, for schools, we see a lot that websites are primarily meant to market to prospective students, and they're also providing resources, forms, policies to current students. It happens. However, there are some things to consider, and the main thing to consider is the thing I love to say. Your content is not for you. Your website is probably not for you. It's not meant to serve you. It's meant to serve your audiences. So just because it's convenient to put internal facing content on your public site doesn't mean it's helpful for anyone involved. And the main reason for that is that the more content there is, the more people have to sort through to find what they need. I mean, almost literally, not literally, but it's just practical, right? That the more you have, the more there is to look at. And that means there's more for both audiences to look at, your internal audiences and your external audiences. My colleague Lindsey Growth came up with this great metaphor that I love, which is when you do this, when you turn your website into just a hub for internal audiences, external audiences, you're giving everyone a bigger closet when what people really need are smaller, well-labeled drawers. They're just looking for their stuff. So yeah, they'll be like, wow, look how big this closet is. Where are the skinny belts? Because that's literally all I'm looking for. And now I don't know where they are. Whereas if everything's just well labeled, they know where to find it. They'll know where to find their stuff. They can find their skinny belt. I heard skinny belts are in for the summer, by the way. So is it helpful in the case of a school specifically? It can be helpful, for instance, for prospective students to get an insider look at what current students have access to in some cases. But also, in any case, content for internal audiences, your people who are already, they're already bought in, can often, much like social media, take a different tone. It can use insider jargon, acronyms. It can be a lot more casual, and that could alienate external audiences. It's just not meant for external audiences a lot of the time. And also sometimes when people have intranets or, internal facing resources on their public website, they sort of forget that the website is literally public, and they start storing things like employee policies, documents, things that's like, does this make sense to be public? Do you want people to be able to find these with Google? Does it make sense to have this on your public website? We would argue that most of the time it doesn't. A separate intranet is probably the better way to go. And also the reason that people do this is because it is convenient. We have this website, so let's use it. So we want to propose some alternative platforms for this that you can use to create an intranet, create an internal collaboration space for your people, like Microsoft Teams, Google Sites, Box. There are open source solutions if you have people to finagle that. You can invest in a custom intranet to meet your needs. And a lot of these offer the features that intranets really need, like file storage, password protection, authentication. And best of all, from the content strategist perspective, these types of tools allow you to keep your audiences separate, and then you can control the message for each, make it easier for both of those audiences. Because understanding the needs for your internal audiences can be a whole project in and of itself. We put a lot of resources in new projects for figuring out who the external audiences are, what do they need, what's their perspective, what words do they use, and the same goes for your internal audiences. So we know this is not always an option though. Sometimes, especially if there's, I keep doing this loud stakeholder in your ear being like, we have our website, we're going to use our website. So if you must, and sometimes you must, I get it. So if you have to use your public website for intranet type content, reduce the cognitive load by just labeling it very clearly and separating it on a visual level from the primary content meant for external audiences. So in this example, for instance, you can see how far the content for external audiences is on the left there: academics, admissions, faculty and research. And then the blue arrow shows you all the way over to the right. There's a whole separate tab for these different audiences. Employees are clearly labeled. Another place that we will often link to internal content or intranet can be in the footer of your website. It's inconspicuous to everyone else. And if you have content that you're linking to for employees, current students, whatever it is, you can sort of tell them, remind them every so often, don't forget, you can find your stuff right here. They can bookmark it. Bada bing, bada boom. It doesn't need to be in that primary nav if it doesn't need to be. Okay, so unless it requires a login, a password, what is out there on your public website is out there for everyone. So let's just remember that your public website is public. People can find it. Okay. The last belief that we're going to reframe today is this one. Everybody's doing it. We just got to invest in a cool video and all our problems will be solved and our skin will clear up and we'll be raking in millions and we'll find the success and validation we always wanted. We just need a cool video. And videos are very cool. I love videos on the web. They can do a lot of things for informational sites. They can give people a good sense of who you are. You can show places, give virtual tours, interviews of people. They can evoke emotion much more efficiently and quicker than content that's written to be scanned. They can be a really effective tool for giving instructions, for showing, they show instead of tell, right? We've all heard that. And they can be used in a lot of places on the web. You can use them on your website, social media, ads, digital displays. You can show them at events. They're very flexible in that way. And people watch video online. I'm sure we all watch video online. We're only watching more videos online, I would say, as time goes on. However, the kinds of videos most of us are probably spending most of our time on, the ones we like and the ones we subscribe to and share with our friends, are probably not marketing videos on informational websites, which is probably the kind of video we're talking about here. These kinds of videos can be expensive to produce. I mean, most often they are expensive to produce if they're good quality. They can have a really short shelf life. If you feature people who leave the organization, or one person in your video makes one stray comment about something you don't offer anymore after 6 months, it's out of date. So they can fall out of date really quickly. They must be accessible, including closed captioning, and they're not always an equitable option depending on the data people have, if they have the bandwidth to stream your videos, and they can be ignored. They're often ignored, in fact. People will stop watching them. And the main reasons why, I love this graph. I don't know why I love it so much, but videos, the main reasons why people stop, the video was not providing the information we want, or the second one that I love, I was bored. Like, how often do we start watching a video and then we're like, all right, I think I've gotten what I need to get out of this. So it's not a silver bullet, just like the slideshow. It looks cool, it can be very cool, but there are reasons to not do it if it's not going to fulfill those needs. So if you're thinking about investing in video, ask, what specific audience need does this speak to? And have people been asking for it? Or do we just think people might maybe want it? Where can we use this video? What platforms will we put it on, and how long? When do we need to check in and make sure this video is still relevant, still current? And again, the most important, who will create this at what cost? Because making engaging video, one that people will actually watch on your website, is a challenge. So again, coming in with the practical advice. Our advice, if you haven't done it already, is to first focus on quality written content. That's content that's easily found by search engines. That's content that's accessible to audiences by nature. Text on the web, it's a beautiful thing. It's inherently responsive. It's, it's all sorts of things. It's great. And it gives your visitors the information that they're looking for. Okay, we've gone through the sort of beliefs that we hear a lot, things that we want to shake out of people, lovingly, non-violently. And then I love to give this little spiel as well, just for like our mental health, our emotional wellness. I really love doing this work. I care about content strategy. I think it's a way to help make information equitable to people. And truly, it's a little cornball, but it's also real, that I really see how good content helps people make decisions about their lives. Think about all the things that you've just looked up online. People make decisions about their dinner. People make decisions about their futures, their college careers, their actual careers, their professional careers, their futures, their finances, their families, based on information they find on websites. At the same time, most websites are not life or death. I always say, if you're here because you're in charge of the web page that tells people when the emergency room is open, or how busy the emergency room is right now, that's life or death. That's quite literally life or death. Most websites are not doing that. So it's just a website at the end of the day where we can take a breath and remember it's just a website. And a website is ultimately a series of decisions, trade-offs. Most of what you've heard today is just me talking about prioritizing. You learn a little bit more about your audiences, or you recognize a little bit more about your own message, and then you prioritize based on that. Every change that you make on your website requires some level of effort, and spending more effort in one place just means spending less effort in another. That's just life, right? We have to prioritize because of that. And so you spin your wheels, you spend too much time, energy, money, whatever it is, when you put all of that effort into content, into features that your site visitors just don't need or don't care about as much as you think they care about them. So make decisions based on what you know about your site visitors, what you hear from them, and don't worry about what other people are doing too much. Also, final part of my my pep talk, a website, a beautiful thing about a website is that it's a living work. It's code. It's never done. It's not, concrete. It's not set in stone. And so let it live. Take it all incrementally. Do the high priority stuff that's on your mind, timely stuff first. You don't have to do it all at once. You can let it live. You can test it with people. Is this working? Adjust it and repeat. Thank you very much for listening today and for being with us. We love doing this. Hopefully that's coming through. I love talking about this and thinking about these kinds of problems with folks. So feel free to reach out. We mentioned Pixo does a lot of webinars on different topics, including content, UX, development, all sorts of stuff. So please join us for, I don't know, now I'm pitching our future webinars, but yeah, join us for future webinars. We really like doing this. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And yes, please join Pixo. They do webinars. We do webinars together. There's tons of resources available through Pixo, and I'll make sure, I know we had a question come in about how to connect with you guys. So I'll make sure to include that in the follow-up email that I send out in case someone joined later, didn't see that chat or whatever it may be. I'll include the link to their site. And then Danielle, I know you had shared your email address, so I'll put that one in the follow-up email as well. It doesn't look like we have any specific questions related to the content, which I know sometimes there's a lot, so it can be overwhelming and you have to go back and revisit it and then something comes to mind. So please feel free to reach out if there's something that, comes to you later when you're listening to the webinar again or anything like that. You can respond to the follow-up email that I send out. You can connect with Danielle directly. Also connect with Pixo on LinkedIn because they share a ton of great resources there as well. But like I said, I'll share all that in the follow-up email. I know it's a lot to get right now. But like I said, I don't see any questions coming through, but thank you so much, Lindsay, for presenting. Thank you, Danielle, for joining us. And thank you to all of our attendees who were here. Since we don't have any questions, we can go ahead and wrap up today's session, but thank you, everybody, and hopefully you have a good rest of your week. Oh, we do have, let's see, something just came in. Oh, yes.
Yeah, no, that's right. Entrepreneurs, man. Yeah, there's a lot of hats to wear, and the website. Yeah, I feel for you.
And then Nitin, I do see that you have your hand up, so I'm going to allow you to talk. So if you want to ask your question, go ahead. Dr. Bosale, are you there? Oh, I can't hear him. Can either of you guys hear him?
I cannot.
Can speak to embedded forms on websites.
Embedded forms on the website. We like embedded forms on a website. I'm not really sure what there is to say about them. There's a lot to say about the usability of embedded forms on the website and like clarity of embedded forms. I don't have anything on hand to share, but we can, if you look up, I mentioned in this talk several times, Nielsen-Norman Group. Nielsen-Norman Group is a great group to look to for best practices on anything. If I'm baseline trying to learn, like, how do I do this in a way that's user-friendly, that's who I go to. And they've done studies on forms on websites, how to make them accessible, user-friendly, clear, easy to use, all of that. So I would check with them. Yeah, a lot of usability studies about forms. Forms can be very tricky. So definitely look into that. Like I said, I don't have anything on hand, but it's good to think very strategically about the forms and how they're built and how they're labeled, everything like that. So yeah, of course.
Dr. Bosale, if you have more that you want to share, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll get you connected with their team as well. If there's something specific you want to ask or something like that, we're more than happy to make sure we can get an answer for you. So, but it does look like now we're caught up. I don't want to cut anyone off again. So now we'll go ahead and close out today's webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to the Pixo team for presenting.
Thank you. Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.